everyone, Jessie from b.a.r.e Flower Farm. Super exciting. As you saw, just got my pallet of 5C tulip bulbs. So 5C means 5 degrees Celsius. So these are pre-chilled bulbs, which I buy because I am growing them predominantly for the winter, meaning I force tulips hydroponically. So you need pre-chilled tulips bulbs in order to be able to achieve winter tulips. So this pallet came today. It's 19 crates, which basically is 500 shy of 10,000 tulip bulbs. Now I had another order of 1,200. So I collectively have over 10,000 bulbs, which is crazy. Now, I'm not growing all of them myself. A couple of people have already reached out and I am selling bulbs to them. I probably already pre-committed about 2,000 bulbs to sell, and I will have a limited amount that I will put online. I'll put the link below. So again, these are pre-chilled bulbs. So in this video, I will talk about if you're not forcing tulips in the winter, who pre-chilled bulbs could be good for. But I also want to just talk about if you're looking to force tulip bulbs, like what information do you need and what are the things that you should be doing upon receiving your tulip bulbs within really the first like 48 hours up to a week at most. So let's get started. I mean, you can see over here, these are just stacked crates. One thing that is really front and center are these labels. Now, no matter who you buy from, you're gonna get labels. What I love about these labels is that not only does it tell me the variety, but it's telling me when the optimum cooling is achieved by. So tulips typically need like on average, we'll call it 16 weeks of cooling. But some tulips can get away with like 14 weeks. Some tulips need like 18 weeks. But beyond the fact that tulips have different varieties have different cooling times, you don't know when exactly the bulb got pulled out of the ground. And that is actually more important. So obviously, if a grower is growing all these different types of varieties, there's no way they're going to harvest them all in the same day. They're likely going to be staggering their harvest. So having this specific date is so helpful. And the reason why these come with a specific date is because these are from Little Farmhouse Flowers, and she is one of the instructors of the Tulip Workshop. So for those people who take the Tulip Workshop, whether online or in person, we all get first dibs for the pre-ordering selection when Little Farmhouse Flowers puts out their tulip bulb selections out, like this is early spring. So my order was all in by late February. Then the harvest comes, they get to see, hey, did what they projected come to fruition? If it doesn't, there might be subs. But at the end of the day, these are all 5C bulbs that they offer. They also offer untreated or just normal bulbs too. And the pricing was pretty competitive. So if at the end of all of that, there are extras left over, they do open it up to the mass public. So if you wanted 5C bulbs, in bulk, in wholesale, meaning by the crate, right? So we're talking about 500 per crate. Little Farmhouse Flowers, I believe, still has some availability. You just have to make sure you set up a wholesale account. So you do need to have a resale tax, or sorry, like you have to fill out that form for the resale tax. So that basically just states that you are not the end-to-end purchaser. You are selling to someone else who is ultimately going to pay sales tax to you, and then you will remit that back to the state. Because if Little Farmhouse Flowers charge you tax and then you charge the customer tax, then there's double dipping for the state sales tax. So all this to say, they are a great place to buy if you're looking for wholesale quantities. And again, if you're looking for non-wholesale quantities, like you want to mix and match varieties, I will do up to 200 bulbs in a shipment with shipping included. But anyway, so back to just why I buy from Little Farmhouse Flowers, even though the price, like I would say on the whole, the price is competitive. I could find similar prices elsewhere, but this information here on the label is so valuable, and it basically eliminates the need for me to go to my sales rep and ask for this information. Now, in my short time of forcing tulips, I have bought from a few suppliers. And what I've come to recognize is that some suppliers don't fully understand the need for precise accuracy on this cooling time and that information for you. So for example, it was a few thousand bulbs, so not anything small, but I think it was like close to like 5,000 bulbs, 4,000 bulbs from another supplier last year. And I talked to the bulb rep and I asked like, hey, like how many weeks of cooling have these bulbs had? I didn't even ask what the cooling time per variety was. And that person unfortunately gave me inaccurate information. And what ended up happening was I forced those bulbs. I had cooled them for about 2 months, thinking that they had already had 2 months of cooling, and basically got like 2-inch stems. So having that accurate cooling information is really, really vital. I will say that Netherland Bulb Company is one of those bigger companies out there where typically those bulb reps do understand the nuances of bulb forcing, because the tulip workshop instructors had traditionally purchased from them. And I just feel like that they had they have like a leg up in that arena because Emily Von Trapp buys so much from them. So all that to say, I wanted to eliminate any of this potential inaccuracy, the time it would take, and that's why I ordered from Little Farmhouse Flowers, because I knew they would come with this kind of information. I'm not being paid to say any of this. This is just personal experience. The other reason why I buy from her is because they go through all the crates and they do sort to make sure any bad bulbs, like rotting bulbs, are taken out. And last year, same supplier, the one that I bought that gave me the inaccurate cooling information, they held my bulbs in 9C cooling, so 9 degrees Celsius. And unfortunately, a couple of crates arrived so rotted that you could smell it. And then for the other crates, I had a hand sort through to make sure that the bulbs were okay. And that was such a laborious process. However, even though Linda and her team at Little Farmhouse Flowers sorts through these bulbs, there is an expectation that I am still sorting through this upon receipt within the next 48 hours to make sure that everything looks okay. And that's what I want to talk to you about next. We're gonna open a couple of crates together and I'll show you what I am looking for, though I probably realistically won't get a ton of really good examples for you because Linda's team will have already sorted through them. Now, one thing to note is I do wear gloves now because there's something called contact dermatitis that you could get with tulip bulbs. It doesn't happen for everyone, but just to be proactive about it, I do wear gloves. Now, just looking at this crate, I mean, these bulbs look freaking fantastic. It's just, they just look so healthy, and I'm trying to see if I could find any that have even blemishes. So this one over here, right? This is kind of like a toasted marshmallow. This is actually completely fine, especially if you're gonna put this into soil. You have to realize that tulip bulbs, not only are they being dug up from the ground in mass using like machinery and all that stuff, then they're washed, they're sorted, they're going on conveyor belts, then they're being put into pallets of crates. They're taking on a lot, right? So something like this will still definitely generate a really, really nice bloom for you. This, I would say, I would actually still hydroforce, even though I think most people would recommend putting this into the ground. This is actually one of my favorites. This is Verona Sunrise, and you can see that the cooling date is as of December 4th. So if this was like a much later cooling date, then I may not actually hold a bulb like this one for forcing. But if this one, let's just say that the cooling date was like November 13th over here, I would definitely force this immediately because I think this would do fine. So a part of the question in terms of when you decide what to force for hydroponics versus soil is also dependent on when you're going to use these bulbs. Now, with over 10,000 bulbs, I'm obviously not going to use them all at once. So it becomes more imperative that when I sort through this, I'm keeping in mind, okay, this variety I'm trying to force for Valentine's Day. Even though this looks like it could be okay for now, if I force it in like a month and a half, will this potentially get worse or whatever? So it's kind of this like human judgment call that you make based off of experience. But generally, you're trying to go through and you're just looking for like, is there any mold? Mold in of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. You're looking to see the weight of the bulb. If the bulb feels really, really light, it's likely that fusarium has already taken place. You're looking to make sure the bulbs are not mushy or rotty. It really doesn't matter if the jacket or the tunic is still on or off. Everything is fine. That is also a little bit more variety dependent, but this crate looks so good. All right, so let's check out Sunrise Dynasty, which is that November 3rd date. I remember last year my Verona Love tulip bulbs also looked really, really fantastic. So let's see how this one looks. So look, you can see that still it looks really, really great. A few more bulbs with blemishes, but these are completely fine. And it's just funny that I can't really find you a good example of what a bad bulb looks like in terms of not being able to use it, even for soil forcing. So I'll see if I could put a photo up later and explain if I can't find any, but like this one's another good example, right? You see this over here, this is probably, it got dinged sometime during transportation or whatever it was. And this eventually, if you hold it long enough, might actually turn into mold. But again, depends on when you're gonna use it. And if you're planting this in soil, it will be completely fine. So all of this just looks so good and I'm so excited to use it. Let's do one more. This one is called Valdiva, and you can see cooling achieved in mid-December. 500 bulbs in here. So look, you can see the difference in terms of the jacket color. This is the Verona Sunrise, this is Valdiva. These are a little bit smaller in size, but still perfectly great in terms of the size. And it just looks so healthy. So one of my priorities today is to actually get one crate. I think it's Charming Princess, I wanna say, rooted, because that is going to be for Christmas blooms. All right, so now that we've gone through that exercise, I am going to do the rest on my own afterwards. A couple of things to keep in mind. There's always this question out there of what is an appropriate amount of bad bulbs to accept. So let's first talk about bad bulbs. I'm putting up here a couple of photos of what bad looks like. So again, if you have a bulb that is like just really light and airy, like you'll feel a difference in the mass of that bulb, it is likely overtaken by fusarium. If you actually see like mushiness or just rot or you smell it, that is definitely like too far gone. If you have one or two in a whole crate, like that's just part of a perishable product. Now, if you were to have a significant amount, I think that the tolerance range is gonna differ for a lot of people. I've heard anywhere from like 5 to 10% is tolerable, but some people will even say like only 2% is tolerable. But let's put this into context, right? Like 2% of 500 is 10 bulbs. Assuming a wholesale cost per bulb is 40 cents, that's like $4. So look, if you order a ton of crates, that does add up and it does make sense for you to go back to the supplier. But if you're talking about one or two crates for like $4 or less than $4, it may not be worth it, especially if you are going to buy from that supplier in the future. All right, so what do you do if you have not so great bulbs? Well, you definitely want to document them. You want to take a photo and then you want to reach out to your bulb rep or to someone at that supplier as soon as possible. And typically you want to do it within 48 hours. Again, this is a perishable product. This would be akin to you buying something at the grocery store that is perishable and going back, like 2 weeks later and saying, hey, this rotted. Well, of course it rotted because it was perishable, right? So some suppliers will graciously give you a week or so to even do that. The last time when I got it, I think I got back to them within 4 days because the timing was just really bad. But don't wait a full month, leave it out in like your garage or outside and then come back and look at it and be like, oh, well, the bulbs have deteriorated. So of course they have deteriorated. So that leads me to the other thing. When you're storing bulbs, one of the key, there's like really two things that you want to make sure, but this time of year, it's obviously naturally cooler. So the temperature piece is less of a concern for most of us. However, humidity still plays a huge role, and high humidity is an enemy for bulbs. So you want to make sure wherever you store it, it is relatively dry. And we're talking about like if you get humidity like 50% or below, that'd be optimal. you know, this is like not like a scientific number here, but if your humidity is like 80, 90%, you have way less time and wiggle room to hold the bulbs than if you had lower humidity. In that case, you would try to get those either all in the ground immediately, or you would try to get them into some storage place where you're gonna hold them. My neighbor started mowing the lawn, so I had to close the garage door since I don't have my mic on me. But I just wanna quickly talk about pre-chilled versus chilled bulbs. So for you out there, if you are growing out in the field and you get a normal winter, you can totally go with unchilled bulbs, because those bulbs will receive their cooling naturally in the ground during the winter. But if you live in a place more in the southern parts of the US or the world where you're not gonna get much of a winter, so for the US, like Texas, Florida, you're not gonna get like a good 16 weeks of cold weather where the ground is going to get cold, then you might wanna consider chilled bulbs. So chilled bulbs then basically have already mimicked winter, and therefore the bulb has received enough cooling. And if you don't receive enough cooling, you'll have heard me reference earlier that I got like 2-inch stems. Cooling is a significant factor in terms of getting long enough stems. It's not the only factor in getting longer stems, but it is a main contributor to getting those longer stems that you want for cut flower tulips. The other reason why you might actually want to consider pre-chilled bulbs, and this is my personal experience last year, was that all of my pre-chilled varieties bloomed about 2 to 3 weeks earlier than my non-chilled varieties. So if you want to succession stagger your tulips, potentially might also work getting pre-chilled bulbs and putting them in the ground. And that's because pre-chilled bulbs are just eager to get going, right? Technically, you've already faked winter for them. So at the first sign of spring, they're gonna get ready to go. Now, this can also backfire, because let's say that I get them into the ground today, we've already mimicked winter, and all of a sudden we get like unseasonably mild weather for like 4 or 5 weeks. They might actually start sprouting or start like rooting and putting on so much growth that they're going to not survive the winter, right? So it does go a little bit of both ways. I'm personally not gonna get my tulips into the ground until probably around Thanksgiving. Our ground just doesn't freeze by then, and I'm also doing a no-dig method, so I can put compost on top and not have to dig. But yeah, so that's another reason why you might wanna consider pre-chilled bulbs. The timing of all this has worked out to be so fluid. I did not plan this, but basically we had a frost yesterday and then I got my tulips today. So our 2023 crop is done outside, but we still have some left. And my goal is to actually achieve some December blooms, because my first CSA pickup is during the last week of December. And I think that I should be able to achieve it at least with a couple of varieties here, because they have already had their cooling time. So I'm gonna get ready and start rooting those hydroponically. I actually also have a market on Sunday, so that's 2 days away, and I'm gonna be selling predominantly lilies. There will be another video on that, but then that will be the end of that. And so for me, my season is honestly just starting, because this is my biggest season. I've started to recognize that fall is actually my biggest time, or my biggest revenue time of the year. And a lot of that is because of my e-commerce background and me selling corms and bulbs. So it actually becomes a high revenue type of season, followed then by tulips, which there's really few other people who are growing at this time. So it makes it a lot easier for me to sell flowers. So similar to last year, I'm going to be putting on YouTube a bunch of videos and just showing you how this goes. If you're interested, the Tulip Workshop does have rolling admissions. I don't get paid to say this, but I just had such a great experience with growing tulips last year. It was a lot of fun. It was fun dominating everyone's Instagram feeds with fresh flowers at a time, when people typically can only post photos that they took back earlier in the season. So that's also another reason for you to think about growing tulips. It's just at that time of year, especially between January and February and March, no one else has fresh flowers. So you get to be top of mind in whoever's feed you are in. So anyway, let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.